Welcome to our continuing journey of taking a look at the stories about Jesus that are only found in Luke, entitled Jesus, No Strings Attached. Um, the author of Luke simply says, here's Jesus. Here's a fresh and new revelation of the nature of God and the way human beings may live peacefully with each other. We find these stories of Jesus as the new wine and new wineskins and one commandment rather than 10. All human beings are invited to follow Jesus, not just a chosen few. He offered a way of life without prejudice, without wealth for one's own pleasure, and a way to live without guilt and anxiety. Jesus offered understanding of God as a patient and forgiving Father rather than a vengeful and judgmental ruler. Yeah, to follow Jesus, according to Luke, was just to live a new life of faith without being bound by all these strings, by law, privilege, prejudice, anxiety, judgment of others. All these religious attachments were cut loose, according to Luke, in the life and teachings of Jesus. Now, this week we're taking another story that is only found in Luke. And there's no better rendering of the story than in Eugene Peterson's The Message. Uh, the Message is trying to take the message from 2,000 years ago and bring it to as the message in language of today, rather than a translation which is word for word. But this is message for message. And Peterson's message is he told his next story to some who were complacently pleased with themselves over their moral performance and looked down at their noses at common people. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a tax man. The Pharisee posed and prayed like this: "Oh God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, crooks, adulterers, or heaven forbid like this tax man. I fast twice a week and tithe all my income." Meanwhile, the tax man slumped into shadows, his face in his hands, not daring to look up, and said, "God, give mercy. Forgive me, a sinner." Jesus commented, "This tax man, not the other, went home made right with God. For if you walk around with your nose in the air, you're going to end up flat on your face. But if you're content to be simply yourself, you will become more than yourself." Now, Jesus was a part of a religious tradition that was complacently pleased with themselves. They were convinced that their life was morally superior to any other. They looked down on people that didn't fast twice a week and didn't tithe. Indeed, anything that differed from their own, they looked down upon. And so their religious tradition, the complacently pleased people, was marked by an attitude of arrogance. His religious tradition was considered to be superior. Another way of considering this story is that the string of a superiority complex was cut, and it was replaced with a humility complex. Humility on the part of the tax man, the publican. Humility was accepting one for who one is. You see, the humility complex, the humility of the tax man, was the first step in having a right relationship with God. The superiority complex of the Pharisee, with one's nose in the air, led that person to fall flat on their face. Now, the good news, according to Luke, was not that the superiority complex was replaced by an inferiority complex. This is a common mistake, that followers of Jesus were not called to be inferior, rather humble, content to be simply oneself. This was the pathway of faith. A friend of mine who happened to be a Jewish rabbi reminded me that the most difficult and demanding part of the Jewish preacher's words to the faithful several centuries before Jesus, in Micah 6:4, it's recorded, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God?" He said, Bruce said, doing justice and love mercy, that was okay. But walking humbly with your God was hard to hear, because Jesus cut the string of superiority and arrogance from the way of faith. For being humble was far more demanding and difficult than doing justice and loving mercy in the tradition that Jesus found himself within. You see, it's my opinion that this story was not included in other narratives about Jesus because the string of superiority was hard to give up. It was difficult for those who looked down upon others, the Pharisees, who fulfilled all of the rules and regulations of the law, to give up their attitude of superiority and replace it with humility, to replace being superior with being humble, to replace vertical vision to look down upon others with horizontal vision, face to face, with one's nose straight forward, not in the air. That kind of faith was demanding. Yes, indeed, threatening and difficult 2,000 years ago, because that religious tradition of the establishment was certainly superior to others. You see, humility is the acceptance of oneself, both one's beauty and warts. And that enables one to accept the other, indeed, their beauty and their warts, to live in harmony and peace with each other. Arrogance, the partner of superiority, stands in the way of peaceful relationships. Superiority and arrogance are barriers to faith, which causes one to finally fall on their face. Humility is the commitment that nothing, social status, economic assets, education, race, gender, national allegiance, or religious rites and practices, tithing and fasting, nothing produces spiritual superiority. Nothing. Now, of course, the reaction to all that we considering today is that we're really saying that being proud is antagonistic to following Jesus. Now, that's not where I'm coming from, and I don't think that's where Jesus was coming from. To be proud of doing one's best, to be proud of being part of a servant community, to be proud to be part of one's family, to be proud of one's ethnic, racial, or national identity. All these are the natural and common human experiences based on one's loyalty and one's identity. These are not antagonistic to the call to follow Jesus. The story we're considering today focuses on the prayer and the prayer, looking down on everyone else. It's an attitude of spiritual superiority, and arrogance was the problem, according to Jesus. Now we've got to be careful with pride, for faithful pride allows room to respect the faithful pride of another person. However, pride can be an inviting door to superiority, which doesn't allow the same kind of pride on the part of others who differ from us. You see, faithful pride can facilitate peace and goodwill among all, as it allows for the same faithful pride on the part of the other. But when one walks through that door of pride and becomes superior or arrogance, that's the string that must be cut, the string of superiority over any other. Jesus in Luke was portrayed as the Son of Man. He didn't have his nose in the air. His nose was always straight ahead, seeing the poor, seeing the rich, seeing the marginalized, seeing the establishment, seeing the leper, and seeing the healthy, seeing the adulterous and the faithful, seeing the Romans and seeing the Jews face to face. And in so doing, he cut the strings of being superior and arrogant and replaced these attitudes with the gift of humility, accepting oneself, warts and all, and accepting others, warts and all, in order to be right with the God of agape love. What does humanity have in common with each other? Children of the one God of love, humility, horizontal vision is the transformational message of the good news according to Luke. Indeed, a story of a fresh Jesus, no strings attached, no noses in the air, but face to face, peace, goodwill among all, based on the humility complex, not the superiority complex. For your thought and conversation, what are your experiences with others whose faith includes a superiority complex? What are your experiences with others who walk with their nose in the air rather than straight ahead? What is your response to the thought of humility replacing arrogance as a pathway to peace on earth, goodwill among all? Thanks for being a part of our journey together.